Hello, thanks for joining me. It's Gabrielle here from Boingboing, and I'm here on behalf of Hastings Opportunity Area to talk to you about PSHE. For those of you who don't know us, Boingboing is a research and practice organisation, which means that we look at the resilience research evidence and we try to translate it into practical activities that schools and other organisations can use. So today we're going to be looking at the mental health and relationships aspects of PSHE and looking at the type of things that you could do to enhance your teaching and help you to feel confident about it. So this clip looks at the underlying aims of the RSHE curriculum and the importance of it, so that you can hold that in mind and allow you to be creative in your lesson planning and also responsive to your particular class while remaining true to what the RSHE curriculum is supposed to be about. I thought I could break that down into three different areas. So the aims, why are we teaching this in RSHE? The content, so broadly what needs to be covered in relation to relationships and mental health education. And then in terms of the method, looking at how the values and attitudes can be developed through your teaching, that being another aspect of the RSHE curriculum. I think when you look at it, you'll see that the aim of the RSHE teaching is very, very powerful and important for children and young people. So in primary school, starting very young, helping children to really understand about healthy, respectful relationships and what goes into making them up. Looking at family and different types of friendships even with other adults, and looking at friendships online. This relationship side is then supported by understanding all aspects of health, so not just physical health, but really having a very good and purposeful understanding of mental health and feelings and emotions and being able to name them. And in secondary school, we can then develop what has been learned in primary school in terms of relationships and go on to the type of relationships which pupils might be experiencing in secondary school, going on to thinking about intimate relationships and sex, and really helping pupils to be able to talk about them and to understand what constitutes healthy relationships to keep them safe. Now, there are a lot of demands always made of PSHE, and sometimes it feels like anything which isn't curriculum stuff is then dumped, oh, we'll teach that through PSHE. But I think we can all agree that these aspects of PSHE or RSHE are very important and really helpful for pupils, particularly at this time. So friendships, most primary school teachers have to deal with a lot of friendship issues, and to sort of be naming the problem and actually sort of tackling it like an issue to be learned about how relationships can be made and how conflict can be solved is useful, in particular because of some of the issues which have come up through lockdown and bubbles and all these different ways that can make people feel isolated or left out and so on. Friendships obviously really, really important for certain pupils. Those with SEND, for instance, may find it very hard to form friendships and relationships sometimes, or some find it difficult to recognise whether someone is truly being a friend to them or in fact whether they're being taken advantage of. So naming all these issues, getting them out in the open and having discussions about them is really, really helpful. And of course, as things grow in an online fashion, both in primary and secondary, knowing how to behave so as not to intimidate other people, and also how to work through social media to keep yourself safe emotionally and physically is very important to be learning at school, and RSHE is the place to be doing that because of the way we do it in this open way where we encourage reflection and discussion. Teaching explicitly about mental health is going to help pupils to learn how to regulate, to learn how to understand what is normal, what is not normal, and also to know when to look for help if things are getting out of control. Sometimes people think, well, if you teach pupils all about mental health issues, then they're going to self-diagnose in the same way that if I go to Google and I've got a sore toe, I'm going to come away thinking I've got gangrene. But actually, that's really only the problem of half knowledge. And your role then in teaching about mental health issues is to give pupils full knowledge so they recognise that they don't actually have an issue if they don't have an issue, but they actually have the language to describe it when things don't feel quite right. And also they know that they don't have to be happy all the time. They recognise they're going to have ups and downs in relationships. And of course, within RHE, you can help them to recognise and report abuse, so to keep them safe. And as part of the methodology of teaching, you can help them to develop their own personal attributes of kindness and generosity and so on. So it's a fully rounded education you give them through RHE. So in terms of what you actually learn in relationships education, as I said, the secondary curriculum builds on what you learn in primary education, and that is about different types of healthy family life, so reflecting the diversity of families in your classroom, looking at what different types of healthy and caring relationships look like so they can recognise if they really are happening. And then within that, then personal space and boundaries, what is okay touch and not okay touch. And that leads on into secondary school to talking about consent. And then also how to respond to conflict. So the way you teach, you can help pupils to understand that it's okay to disagree with people. Again, looking at online relationships safely, but also how they can also be helpful. So not just to condemn the online relationships out of hand. And then in secondary school, looking at intimate sexual relationships. The mental health aspect of the curriculum is not as daunting as it may sound. It really is about just trying to teach pupils how to recognise feelings and how to name them, give them lots of different words so they can work out what's going on, realise and reinforce the idea that certain ranges of emotions are normal, particularly at this time of anxiety, but also that you have a range of emotions even during the day, and that's okay. But recognising that mental ill health is common, so that they don't need to be frightened of it, to destigmatise it. But when do you need to ask for help? When do your feelings feel like they're out of control? Although this isn't actually stipulated, I went to a school in Caerphilly, an infant school, where the pupils were all taught about the amygdala and how the brain works and how, fight, flight or freeze responses. And they had a TA who dressed up as Dr. Brain, and they were really, really very confident in their understanding of that, and therefore could understand why some of their peers in the class behaved in certain ways. They didn't call it naughty behaviour. They really recognised what was going on. So that is something which you could do as well. And then on the curriculum, looking at the internet, and again, we would advocate not just to look at the dangers within the internet, but how the internet can really be helpful. There are lots of places which are helpful to support people who don't want to go to a person but want to seek support on the internet, but finding those safe spaces to go to support yourself. Looking at changes in puberty and how that might affect mental health. And then also in secondary school, recognising mental health issues in their friends and then knowing what to do about it and how to get help. And then, of course, obviously in the RHE curriculum, there are lots of other aspects of health and drugs and physical health and so on, which need to be covered. So thinking about how you're going to deliver these great bits of content, as I've mentioned before, there are schemes out there like the PSHE Association and Jigsaw, and on C-Zone there's lots of information you could use. But the main thing is really to adapt that to your own teaching style and to hold in mind the idea that we're trying to get these children to develop their values and attitudes. And that's actually something which can be taught and can be learned, but it's quite important. I would say the first rule is to ditch your discomfort about anything. I've chosen this picture of a cat because I think that sometimes describes the look on teachers' faces when they have to teach things they feel a bit uncomfortable and difficult. And really that's going to just translate to the pupils really, really quickly, and you don't want that to be happening. Embrace what you're teaching. I've talked in other clips about using case studies, and there's lots of places you can get case studies or make up your own so the pupils can identify, but they're not just necessarily, they don't necessarily feel like they're talking about themselves. Think of lots of different ways to encourage interaction and discussion between people, and for pupils really to get that opportunity to reflect. Also think about the transitions when you're transitioning out of other lessons and then into PSHE, and then again back out of PSHE to other lessons. To think about what that's going to feel like and have a very definite break. And the final thing is to make sure that these lessons are fun, that you're trying to think of different ways. There was a great lesson I saw where it was about feelings, but people put their feelings in a balloon and then they wrote different feelings on the outside to demonstrate how you can sort of show different faces to the world. And all of these things can be really good fun ways of getting these messages across. Finally, think about the fact that your PSHE really sits in the terms of the whole school and shouldn't really be something on your own. So let's try and get all colleagues involved when you're teaching PSHE so they know what's going on and they can reinforce things. And also try to make sure it reflects the diversity of people in your school. I've said that about families, but just lots of different ways of celebrating and sharing and discussing different values and attitudes. And also think about how to signpost people to help. But again, for safeguarding reasons, try to discourage pupils for actually talking about themselves and their own issues in the class, because we can't control how that's going to be received and whether they will later regret having said things. So that's it for this session on the aims and content of RSHE. Look out for further clips about assessment and other teaching ideas. See you then. Boingboing, we have a range of resources, including resources for the academic resilience approach to promote whole school mental health and well-being. You can access them at boingboing.org.uk for free.